This is a floppy disk drive, but it's not for a computer. Well, kinda sorta, but not really. It's an add-on for the Nintendo Famicom game system, and it gives the console some pretty neat new capabilities. It also made pirating games an absolute breeze. Let's find out how, right now, here on Retro Bits. In the last episode, I traveled all over Japan to try and answer the question of whether or not it's still possible to find good deals on retro hardware. I ended up purchasing this family computer disk system complete in box for 12,800 yen, or around 85 US dollars.
Famicom Disk System 新登場.
Sold only in Japan, the disk system debuted in early 1986, about 2.5 years into the family computer's life cycle, and a few months after the NES launched in the US. The expansion was originally priced at 15,000 yen, or around $235 when adjusted for inflation. By the time the NES came to market, the underlying hardware was already 2 years old and starting to show its age. The original Super Mario Bros. Was already pushing up against the limit of what could be crammed into a ROM cart given the maximum address space of 40 kilobytes. Mapper chips weren't yet in widespread use, so something else was needed to extend the life of the Famicom. Enter the disk system. Based on Mitsumi's quick disk format already in use by word processing typewriters and musical devices, these double-sided floppies could store a total of 128 kilobytes. With over 3 times the space of a cartridge, they allowed for much larger and more advanced games to be created for the aging console. Zelda no Densetsu, the Hyrule Fantasy, or Legend of Zelda in the West, debuted as a disk system launch title, taking advantage of the extra storage available to realize a huge open-world adventure. Well, huge for the time anyway. Because floppies were much cheaper to produce than ROM cartridges, disk system games retailed for significantly less, often half the price of comparable cartridge games. Extra storage wasn't the only thing on offer though. The disk system supplemented the base console's 2 kilobytes of work RAM with an additional 32K to cache data from the disk, along with 8K of graphics memory. An additional channel of Wavetable audio was also implemented, giving disk system titles improved music and sound effects compared to their cartridge-based counterparts. Each disk is subdivided into blocks and begins with an info block and a file count block. The former contains a verification header and licensee code, along with other metadata about the game. Multiple header and data blocks follow that both describe and contain the game files. A 16-bit checksum is calculated for each data block and stored in the header. What's particularly interesting about the Mitsumi unit is that it operates more like a tape than a conventional random access drive. The entire contents of the disk are streamed from start to finish with each pass of the read head, which then returns to the beginning and starts over again when additional data is requested by the console. Each full pass of the disk takes the drive about 6 seconds to complete. Before we move on, I thought I should mention the Sharp Twin Famicom. This officially licensed console arrived later in the same year as the disk system and integrated the family computer and disk drive into a single unit. Available in 2 different colors and sporting composite video, the Sharp was otherwise functionally the same. As we've established, ROM cartridges were expensive to manufacture at the time. Further, chip shortages made it difficult for Nintendo to keep up with demand. Discs were seen as a cost-effective way to work around the problem, and the company even came up with a clever method to make distribution quicker and easier. No, I'm not talking about piracy, but we'll come to that shortly. Nintendo deployed disc writing kiosks to retail stores throughout Japan. Consumers could bring in old games and rewrite their existing discs with new titles for much less than the cost of a cartridge. It was sort of like trading up, or you could think of it more like a long-term rental. The price for this service was cheap, only 500 yen. New blank discs were also available for 2,000 yen apiece. Curiously enough, there were several disc writer kiosks available on eBay at the time I was making this video. The price was low enough that I seriously considered buying one, despite the abject lack of space in my home for more vintage hardware. What do you think? Want to see a video all about this subject? Let me know in the comments. And here it is, the family computer disk system that I brought back with me from Japan. Let me get the plastic wrap off and then we'll take a look at what we've got here. All right, let's take a look at the disk system box really quick. We've got a nice yellow and silver color scheme here, and we have sort of an outline wireframe drawing of the product inside, along with the disk system mascot. This is known as Disk-kun, and he will appear on all of the disk system products that we're going to take a look at. One thing that's interesting though is the design language of this box is quite different from the console that it goes with. If you look at the original family computer box, it has a red and blue and silver color scheme, along with actual photos of the product. So a little bit different from the box the disk system comes in. Now they sold almost 4.5 million of these things, so they are relatively easy to get your hands on even today, despite them only ever being sold in Japan. Let's see what we've got here. Inside, we've got the family computer disk system manual, and it shows us how to hook up the system, how to connect everything, how to operate the software. Okay, so pretty much all the basics. Here we've got a notification, thank you for purchasing the product, and also a warning not to leave it powered on all the time. I guess if you left this connected and turned on all the time, maybe it suffers from overheating or something like that, so a warning about that. And also here we've got another warning, don't mess with the system when the activity LED is on. All right, let me get the drive out and we'll take a look at this. Okay, here we've got the important parts. First up is this piece, which connects to the main console through the cartridge port, and this is called the RAM adapter, and it contains the disk controller, the additional memory, and the additional sound hardware, along with this plug, which allows you to connect it to the disk drive itself. Here's the disk drive, and what's really nice is that they included the transit card in the box, so that keeps it safe during shipping. Eject button, transit card comes out, and we also have an activity LED right there. Other notable features, we have this port on the back where you would plug in the RAM adapter, and then here on the back we've got this little trap door. If we open that up, you can see that it's a compartment for 6 C-cell batteries. Now, why you'd want to power this thing from batteries, I'm not sure. You'd still need mains power for the console and TV, but I don't know, maybe power strips weren't that common in Japan back in the day and you only had 2 outlets to work with, so maybe you wanted to power your disk drive from batteries while you used the other outlets for your console and TV. Not really sure. Of course, the kiosks weren't the only way to obtain games, and retail versions were also available on brand new discs. Strangely, that also includes adult titles which weren't available in the kiosk, so that's just something I can't even imagine Nintendo allowing here in the United States. Another interesting thing is the Nintendo embossing on the discs. Notice that the recesses for the I and the N are deeper than for the rest of the letters. And the reason for that is because the embossing acts as a rudimentary lockout on these custom discs, so only the ones with the correct recesses will load into the drive. Standard quick discs won't work, but we'll come back to that in a moment. Another thing to notice is that these discs don't have any shutter protecting the magnetic media inside, so they're easily damaged, and that was a problem. A lot of people lost their data because children touched them or allowed them to get dusty or dirty. Later releases on these blue discs did have shutters to keep the discs safe from debris and other damage. While I was in Japan, I stopped by the Nintendo store in Tokyo, and I found that they were selling this disk system IC card holder. You put your subway card in here and then you badge in with this instead of taking the card out of your wallet. What I really love about this is that Nintendo is still acknowledging the importance of the disk system by selling a product even to this day to remind us of them. And look how accurate it is. Dimensionally, it is identical, the color's the same, even the embossing of the Nintendo logo is the same. The only real difference here is that they've got this little part here that holds the lanyard in, so this probably won't slot into the drive. You probably wouldn't want to anyway, but I just thought this was a really cool thing that they are still selling a disk system item even in 2024. Okay, I just have to find out for myself. Let's take a look at the transit card. I think that this little protrusion matches up with that, so I think maybe this will act as a transit card if you don't have anything in it. Let's find out. Okay, no, it's too thick. They've made it just a little bit thicker than the original disc, so it will not fit into the drive. That's probably a good thing. All right, well, I just had to know for myself. It's really common for these to need to have a belt replacement, and I don't know if the shop I purchased it from has done that already, so I'm just gonna get this thing opened up so we can take a look inside. All right, I've got the drive apart, and the first thing I wanted to show you is this front faceplate. And here, if you look carefully on the inside, you can see the reverse embossing for the Nintendo logo. So that's how it prevents discs that don't have that recess from slotting in. If we take our disc and we just put it in here like so, you can see it's a perfect fit. The Nintendo logo lines up and it locks right into place. That's pretty cool. All right, next thing is that we've got this drive mechanism here, and you can see that it's made by Mitsumi. Hope you can see that. And we have what appears to be a good condition belt. So this was probably serviced in the shop before it went out for sale, which is great. I don't have to replace the belt. We should be good to go. Future Matt here. After filming that segment, I found these remnants while I was cleaning the inside of the drive enclosure. I'd say this is definitive evidence that the original belt disintegrated years ago. You know what? Just as a precaution, I'm going to clean the read-write head in there. It looks like there's some black stuff on there. That may just be the head itself, but I want to make sure, just in case the shop didn't do it before they put this out on the shelf for sale. Nope, it looks clean. I think that was just the head itself. No dirt. All right, moving on. Let's have a quick look at the inner workings of the RAM adapter. First, and most important, is the Ricoh 2C33. This ASIC, or Application-Specific Integrated Circuit, functions as a disk controller, provides the additional Wavetable sound channel, and includes the disk system's 8 kilobytes of BIOS ROM. Next to that, we have 8K of SRAM that stores the tile and sprite data used to construct the graphics. Finally, these 4 chips provide 32K of DRAM for caching program data from disk. If you've been paying attention, you'll have noticed that this mirrors the size of the ROMs on a traditional cartridge. No surprise, as the disk system still needs to work within the context of the console's fixed memory map. Right, that's enough exposition. Let's test this thing out. While generally short, there are of course loading times when using disks instead of carts. Also, disk changes are pretty frequent. Some games even came on multiple floppies. Famicom Grand Prix 2 3D Hot Rally is a disk system exclusive. It has support for 3D glasses, which were another add-on exclusive to Japan, and predate the Virtual Boy by 8 whole years. The gameplay is similar to Outrun, which came out 2 years earlier. Both feature bright soundtracks, branching paths through different environments, as well as time checkpoints. Disk titles were the first to implement save games, as cartridges were still using password systems at the time. Some games, like Versus Excitebike, even had level editors that allowed you to save your custom tracks to play later. Before we move on, let's take a moment to compare the console's original audio with the Wavetable enhanced version. Only a single new channel is provided, so the difference is subtle. But if you listen carefully, you should hear how the disk system enhances the game's music and sound effects. So, what do you think happened once Nintendo started making games on floppy disk available to the public?
Don't copy! Don't copy that floppy!
Yep, piracy. So much piracy. Bootleg games and disk copying devices started to become readily obtainable. Schematics for building your own duplicator were published. Third parties sold modified disks, and dozens of copy programs and advanced hardware add-ons appeared on the market. One such device is the Game Doctor, pictured here, which sits between the cartridge port and the RAM adapter to facilitate disk copying, save states, and the playback of modified cartridge games. With later revisions, Nintendo designed copy protection directly onto the PCB inside the disk system. What ensued was a game of cat and mouse, as hackers reverse engineered the device and created new ways to defeat the copy protection. Nintendo then added additional protection to the controller chip on the MiTsumi drive. Rinse and repeat. So, should we see what's involved for ourselves? You know, for science. Well, if you insist, then we're going to need some quick disks. I found these new in-package floppies for a Smith Corona typewriter on eBay. Straight out of the package, these third-party disks won't even fit into the drive, so we'll need to modify them a bit. Step 1. Remove the tabs on either side that prevent the generic floppy from fitting into the slot on the disk system drive. Step 2. Replicate the physical lockout that allows the disk to seat properly in the drive. Whoops! Good thing I printed 2 copies. With a little bit of glue and patience, we have something that resembles an authentic Nintendo disc. Geometrically, at least. Now, we have the chicken and egg problem. How to load copying software on the console when the cartridge port is already being occupied by the RAM adapter. I don't have an old school hardware copier like the Game Doctor, nor do I have any other means of writing a quick disk. That's where the FDS key comes in. You can build this modern open source project yourself, or buy one pre-built for about $10. It connects to the RAM adapter where the disk drive normally goes, and allows you to mount image files in order to emulate the drive. My disk system has a revision 4 PCB with integrated copy protection logic. That means I had to perform a very minor modification to bypass the circuit. I'll spare you the details, but the information is readily available on the internet. Thankfully, the MiTsumi drive in my unit is the earlier revision that does not have copy protection built into the drive controller chip, so I can leave that alone. With a blank image prepared on the FDS key and the copier software loaded, I'll swap the cable back to the real drive to start reading data into the disk system's onboard RAM cache. At 12 kilobytes a second, the entire side can be read in just around 6 seconds. With only 32K of RAM to work with, you'll have to repeat the process several times until both sides of the original disk have been copied. If all goes according to plan, you'll now have a backup copy of your original game disk stored safely on the FDS key. With the digital backup process complete, writing your new image back to a real disk is exactly the same procedure as before, but in reverse. And now, the moment of truth.
And there was much rejoicing.
It goes without saying that the same process could be used to write an image of a game you don't own the original of, but I'd never do that. Over the years, around 200 games were released for the disk system, including a handful of exclusive titles. The low price and convenience meant that the system remained popular, but rampant piracy overshadowed its success. Over time, cartridges became cheaper to produce and mapper chips and battery-backed save games entered the mainstream. The advantages of the slower floppies began to vanish, and the disk system saw its final game release in 1992, 6 years after its unveiling. Shockingly, Nintendo continued to support disk writing services until 2003, a full 20 years after the Famicom's initial launch. So there you have it. The Famicom Disk System is an important part of Nintendo's history, and was without a doubt a commercial success, despite the piracy it ended up enabling. I hope you enjoyed this bit. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time on Retro Bits.